We didn't grow up knowing what executive function skills were. Life felt overwhelming. Managing time, staying organized, and feeling stuck made everything difficult. What we didn't realize was that we lacked the skills to plan, prioritize, and break goals into manageable steps. After years of trial and error, we've seen how powerful executive function skills can be. With expert interviews, real stories, and practical strategies, this podcast is the resource we wish we had. Whether you're a student, parent, or professional, we're here to help you unlock your potential. Welcome to the Executive Function for All podcast. Today we're joined by Lana Gollyhorn. Lana is a therapist with over 17 years of experience working with children, adolescents, and families. She is the creator of Parenting the Plugged-In Child and delivered a TEDx talk called Childhood is Not a Checklist. In this episode, we explore the social side of executive function, how executive function challenges show up in relationships, and how parents can guide their children through these social missteps without triggering shame. This is an important topic that I rarely hear spoken about. I really admire Lana's support and help here, and let's begin. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Brandon.
The reason I wanted to have you on is because when we spoke on the phone, you brought up a topic that I'd actually never heard of before. And that is this: how do executive function challenges impact student relationships? We always look at it from the side of academics, but I want to dive into that with you.
Okay, let's go.
So how do these executive function challenges impact students' relationships?
So sometimes when I think about how a kid's day unfolds, I think about, from when they get to school all the way through the entire school day till they hop in the car with their mom or dad or, parent. And sometimes they have that story to tell their caregiver or the person who's picking them up. And they're like, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And the stories that they tell me when they come into therapy sessions are pretty similar, right? Except they're uncensored. So I get some really good information about how kids feel about their interactions during the school day. And I usually get it from both sides. So kids who have friends who they adore, close friends who have executive function struggles, and how it feels to be on the receiving end of some of those struggles or behaviors. And then also the kids themselves who have executive function struggles and either feeling guilty or feeling like embarrassed, or maybe even just feeling oversensitive to people's responses to their behavior. So a couple of examples that I think about: let's think about someone in middle school, a 6th or 7th grade student, and they're going through their day. So we have the start of the day where it's how stressful was the morning? What did you forget? Did you get into hot water with mom or dad because you weren't getting out the door? And when you get there, it's like a repeat of, what did I forget? What did I not bring? Who's going to be upset with me? And let's say their good friend leans in and tells them a really important, piece of intel. Like, guess what? I talked to this and we get to go up, to the mountains this weekend and I'm so excited. And the friend who is struggling with their morning is zoned out because they're like, I didn't do my spelling, or I didn't write that essay, or they're so amped up about the thing in their mind that they just can't even be excited with their friend who they really care about. So it kind of shows up as either being checked out, insensitive, not even being excited with the friend, or almost disinterested in the activity that the friend wants to share with them. Like, let's go to Elitch's. And the friend who forgot their essay at home is like, yeah, cool. So who's going to be mad at me? And how bad is the rest of my day going to be for this reason?
Yeah, well, and it's something that I saw so much in my teaching career, is that preoccupation. And I never pinned it as that, right? Like, you assume when the bell rings that you're getting these students who are like a blank slate-ish. Like, some students have a hard time outside of school. We always forget the ones with these executive function challenges. They've often had some challenges before they even step in the building, and it's hard to reset.
It's super hard to reset. And it's interesting too, if I look at middle school, because it's a particularly difficult time, I think, for a lot of kids in general, but we see missed social cues, which we can talk about more in detail. And we see struggle with them, regulating their emotions. So a little bit like what I just mentioned in the morning, they're set off by something, or they have a little bit of kind of an emotional consequence from their morning, and they just can't really be there. And sometimes they might be controlling unintentionally, they'll control the topic or like a game, like if there's an early morning recess/break and they're out playing a game, they might take out their sort of stress or their frustration or even their anxiety by controlling the game that the kids are playing.
Got it. So it comes off as controlling, bossy.
Yes.
Words like that. Yeah.
So then you're kind of like, you were checked out earlier or maybe not listening to your friends. And then you go out and you're playing and you're maybe railroading people's ideas or asking them to stop or requiring that they stop one version of a game to play the one you want. And most of the kids doing those things are completely unaware of it. It's not intentional. They're not like, I don't care what you guys are doing. I'm going to do what I want. I can't even think of a circumstance when that is the case.
Is it because they're just trying to find control because the morning felt so out of control?
It might be for that reason. And I think sometimes too, they're neurochemically amped up. So like if you go into any setting, neurochemically like amped up, you're just, whatever comes in front of you, it's like is fodder for that energy.
Yeah.
So that might be it too.
Yeah, well, when we were talking before, you spoke to something that just like really got me thinking. It was, we always think about like these big, overwhelming class projects and how our students with these challenges struggle breaking those down into small, manageable pieces. You talked to me about multi-step directions with friends.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And that just really got me thinking about how many times they're conversing with friends where multi-step directions come in and how they struggle with that. Can you speak more to that?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. I think that was my original conversation with you when I was like, I think it really affects personality and friendships.
Yeah.
And so let's start with kind of like an elementary school interaction. If two kids want to play with each other or they're hanging out or goofing around or talking, there aren't a whole lot of things going on in terms of a social script or expectations of a flow of how things unfold. It's like, do you want to play? Yes. Fun. And then as long as you're not, throwing rocks at someone's head, or as long as you're not calling somebody names or being mean, it can be straightforward. And kids have a lot of space, I think, to maybe have these kinds of sort of social mishaps or even missed social cues. However, right around ages 10 and 11, and sometimes earlier with kids who are gifted, and as we know, a lot of kids with executive function struggles are also gifted, right? So what ends up happening is that right around that time in middle school, the social script or the social steps involved in a basic interaction are more. So for example, I use the example of, let's say, again, it's lunchtime. So in middle school, they call it break or recess, depending. Let's say a group of kids are all going to meet up to eat lunch at a certain place, and then they're going to go play a game at another location. And they talk about it between classes. So the kid or kids with executive function struggles know that we're going to go do this thing. And they might have picked up on the fact that we're eating lunch together. They might have missed, then we're going to go play kickball. Or they might have missed the lunch part and they picked up on the kickball part. So then fast forward, they went through a couple classes and now it's lunchtime. So they go to meet where they normally meet for lunch, but their friends aren't there. Then their feelings are hurt. They feel rejected. They feel like the group left without them. And sometimes it's because they didn't get the memo when it was discussed. We're going to meet over by, Ms. Johnson's room, and then we're going to walk over to the kickball area.
Yeah, well, it's those multi-step directions too. Like it made so much sense when you explain it because we just struggle with multi-step directions. So you can get half of it right and still feel like your friends betrayed you.
Right, exactly. And also have the intention of wanting to be with your friends. Other examples would be even in a conversation. So let's say someone's talking about their spring break. Right? The kids like to come back to school and share their stories. And the one kid is explaining like, well, first we did this, we stayed home for a bit, and then I went and visited my aunt and uncle in California. And the friend who's listening is thinking about what they did at home. They missed the entire California story because let's say the home story was, we got a puppy. Yeah. And the kid is like, oh, I love puppies. We got a puppy once. Or they're thinking about, I would love to get a dog. And next thing you know, they're having a really interesting sort of conversation in their mind about dogs. They missed the entire California part. So then towards the, as the conversation's unfolding, the kid who missed the California story is looking like they don't care, or maybe they aren't interested, and it can hurt their friend's feelings. Or it might come up in another context and the friend's thinking like, you never told me, I never heard about this California thing. I only know you got a puppy.
Yeah.
So it's tricky.
Well, and then because a lot of our students here are high school and college, right? And so there is a betrayal piece where I'm sure there's a lot of miscommunication that happens, right? Where you feel like you didn't get invited to something or you missed something, but really it was just part of this multi-step direction or a lot of verbal coming at you, or you were distracted from something that happened earlier.
Absolutely. The other thing I think that can happen really at any age, and probably more so from high school and up into, adulthood, is that once you have a perception that maybe you've been rejected by your friend group or not included in some way, it can become a truth in your mind. So in your mind, your friends left without you. In your mind, you didn't get invited to the hangout. In your mind, you were excluded on the thrifting part of the weekend plans. And so if that becomes a truth in someone's mind, then they might start acting differently with those friends. And then it's this whole domino effect where if you feel rejected, you might back off a little, or you might be a little annoyed with your friends. And then next thing you know, the person on the receiving end is confused and they're like, why are they acting weird? And it becomes this real domino effect.
Well, and also I can see parents as well, when a student gets in the car and they're like, my friends didn't invite me to this. And I know as a father, I would get very protective, right? And I would take that story as 100% truth when maybe there's just pieces missing.
Absolutely. And also I think it can be confusing for parents because it's like, this just doesn't make sense. This is your friend group. These are your friends for a long time. You guys get along. And, friendships include snafus and struggles at all ages. But, as a parent, you might be like, what? This just doesn't add up. This isn't how Ellie usually acts. Like, this isn't how it goes with you guys. So it is tricky. It puts parents in a position of, not knowing like what really happened. And also they don't want to make accusations about their child's behavior either.
So help me break this down. If we have a presentation, I can tell you how to break that down into like what to do on Monday, what to do on Tuesday to get to this on Friday. But as a parent, it feels overwhelming. Like, how do I help my students with executive function skills and social skills? That seems really challenging to me.
I think it is. And sometimes we end up when we're trying to help kids or young adults with anything, it's like we ideally don't want to have islands of competence where they're like, really, they have the homework thing figured out, or they really have the social thing figured out, but they can't get through their work. We are hoping that when we teach them executive function skills, that they can transfer into different contexts. But in my experience, they don't transfer unless we help them practice or we help reflect back on the situation that happened and kind of like analyze it a little. So I can give you a couple of ideas, I think.
So, what does this look like? Let's say a student comes home and they're really upset about something that happened socially. If you were a parent, like, how does that look?
So oftentimes when kids, again, especially kids with executive function struggles, might have a really big reaction to 7 out of 10 situation might feel like 12 out of 10 when they get in the car. So sometimes I think it's nice just to let them tell the whole story, which might be the whole car ride.
And not trying to fix, right?
Yeah, you're not like, don't worry, it'll work out. Or like when you get into college, there's always the kids complain about that. They're like, I'm so tired. I'm in 8th grade. If I hear another story about when you get into college or when you're a grown up. But so I think the first piece is letting them rant/talk/vent, just unhindered, uncensored, and not corrected. And they might say some pretty dramatic things like, I am never going to talk to that person again. And you just kind of let it sit. Then I think a great question to really organize the conversation is to ask your child, okay, I'm glad you vented. That sounds like that must have been really frustrating. Or I can see why you're upset. Then you could say, do you want to problem solve right now? Or what would feel helpful? And sometimes the kids are like, there's no problem to be solved because,
Because we're not really friends again, right?
Yeah, because Kevin was a jerk. Oftentimes they're just like, oh, yes, let's do it. And I think there's an opportunity if they agree, they're open to it. And they might still have some, they might be annoyed or frustrated, but it's a supportive move, I think. So a couple of things you could do is, one is, you've already asked them what happened. Another thing you can do is ask them, if you were to go back, if you had a magic wand and you could go back, is there anything that you just wish that you might have done differently? And sometimes they might feel a little defensive, but they usually have some ideas. Another question would be is there any way that you misunderstood what they did or what they said? Is there a possibility that they didn't leave without you? I know sometimes you might miss a detail. Do you think there's a possibility that you just missed a detail? And again, your child might be like, no, it's impossible. And they might also be like, yeah, I may have missed a detail.
But it seems like even if they're like, yes, it's impossible in that moment, it still plants a seed for later on.
Absolutely.
That there is a potential that they miss something in the conversation. Like you plant that seed, right?
Right. And there's a possibility that later in another interaction, even if as a parent you didn't get a chance to really, tie that up with a bow in a way that felt really rewarding as a parent, you did plant the seed, and also you created an environment where your child can tell you their truth and their experience without it being edited, without it being dismissed, in that initial download. Sometimes what the kids tell me is that, like, I know what I did wrong or what happened. I just want to be able to tell the truth without someone, disagreeing with me, or they say, being judged.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's debriefing after a challenging one. Is there ways that if you have a scattered kid, is there a way to proactively teach these social skills?
I think so. I think part of it starts with, let's look at their interactions outside of school. So obviously you can't be in school with your child, and there's a lot of other adults who are organizing those interactions, or maybe even helping kids, improve their interactions. So I like to think about what happens outside of school and ways to help your child with social interactions outside of school. One of them is helping them make plans. So let's say they did have that interaction with their friend, and a great way, I think, to teach some reparation or even just move on is to ask your child, okay, this weekend, you have Saturday free. Do you want to invite Ella over for? And I kind of suggest for parents to just think in their mind, like, who, what, where, when. We know why. We know why because we're encouraging their friendships. Who? Let's invite Ella over this weekend. What? Suggest something they could do. Like, not, do you want to invite Ella over this weekend so things would feel better? That's going to be no, because that's too scary. But do you want to invite Ella over this weekend to have dinner and sit by the fire pit or watch a movie or make holiday cookies or something? And then your kid can kind of imagine, like, how would this look? My friend's coming over. We're going to eat. We're going to sit by the fire pit outside, and we're going to make cookies. I know what that looks like. I know that I know how to act in those settings.
It doesn't feel as scary and as overwhelming versus like fix your relationship.
Yeah, go fix your relationship at recess. Yeah. Or go fix your relationship, between classes in high school during finals week or something. It's just, it's unscripted, it's confusing, it's a lot to ask. But I think if we can create some structure, even for teenagers, like, hey, we have an extra ticket to, the Rockies game tonight, or we have an extra ticket to this show, the Nutcracker or something. Do you want to invite Ella? And then, your child might be like, oh, this thing happened this week. Yeah, I know. But here's the thing. We're just going to drive there. We're going to get some hot cider, and we're going to watch the show. And you guys can just watch the show, and it'll be easy.
And it teaches the resiliency of jumping back in.
Yeah, you can jump back in.
And not avoiding, but also doing it in a way that doesn't feel like too much.
Yes, I think it's it's a little bit like, sometimes I talk to the kids about bowling because I'm from the Midwest and that's what we do, right? Yeah. When you have a gutter ball over and over and you're not in the mood to take a bowling class or like work on your form, you might just want to have fun and put the bumpers up. And I think providing structure for kids is like that.
What's the line between, because one of the hard things I know you and I have is we have parents who jump in too much. What is the line between letting this play out and knowing when to jump in? I know it's different for every kid, but do you have a thought process around that?
Ooh, that is so hard. It's so hard, especially when your child is so upset. You're like, ooh, I just want to write this text message.
Yeah.
So I would say things not to do would be, I think, taking your child's phone and communicating with the friend would be a no.
Very big no.
Let's start with the absolute no's. Yeah. Let's not do that. Sometimes kids, especially in high school relationships, sometimes kids will have their friends' parents' numbers and they will text their friend's parent. We don't want that either. So we don't want the parent privately interacting with the friend, and we don't want the parent privately or just even saying, let me craft this text for you. But what you could do is say, like, oh, did you ever reach out to Ella about, getting together or about what happened or just to see what she's up to? No, I don't know what to say. Okay, well, let's think of all the options.
Yeah, I know we do that a lot. Well, we phrase it through role play, but it's not even necessarily role play. It's like, because it feels really big and overwhelming to write that text message, right? So it's like, here are the things we could say. And they're going to put it in their language and their slang. And
yeah, in their words. And sometimes it's just easier if you're initiating contact with someone after a conflict or you feel anxious to ask a question and let them go. Like, so whatever happened with your, dance recital? And then it's for sure the right thing, right? Because you're asking how your friend's doing, and there's just no way that can be wrong. And I think it's a really easy way for kids to jump back in is to ask a question of their friend. Like,
I love that. Yeah, I love that. It's a great way to show you care too. Like if you've had this fight, to show you care still about the other person.
Right, exactly. Even when you don't know what to do.
Yeah, well, and I like a lot of what you're saying because it's so easy for our kids to avoid.
Yes.
Like it feels like an anxiety producing. We know there's a high correlation between these executive function challenges and anxiety. And it feels big and overwhelming, but just giving them little hints to structure it so they can jump back in and just get more comfortable with that, right?
Yes, like a low risk intro back into the friendship. Another thing, Brandon, I just thought of that we haven't discussed is how to apologize.
Ooh, good one. Well, my least favorite fact to talk about, I talk about all the time on the podcast, is the typical kid with ADHD especially gets 20,000 more negative comments than positive by the age of 10.
Oh my gosh.
And then it goes up from there, right? So what happens is we get very defensive over time. Like you can only apologize so much. But when it's time to really apologize, we've been defensive so long. I don't think a lot of us have that skill anymore.
So I like to teach kids 3 steps to an apology. And I don't know where this came from. I'm sure someone else came up with this idea, but I've been using it for years.
Yeah.
So the first step might be like, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of something egregious a child might have done.
Called you something.
Yeah, I'm sorry I called you a cheater. So it's really just repeating the thing. And sometimes there's a difference of opinion. Like maybe you use the word cheater, but you were, quote, joking and your friend's offended. It's like, okay, you could say, I'm sorry I said the word cheater.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be like deciding what's correct or true or who's right or wrong. It's just the beginning of saying, this is what I did.
It's an acknowledgement of what happened.
Yeah, it's acknowledging it, and it's starting the process of reparation. So yeah, I'm sorry I said you were a cheater. And you can be sorry. You can still even think they're a cheater. They might be an actual cheater, right? But you love this friend. So you say, I'm sorry I said you were a cheater. And then the friend might not respond or grumble. And then you can say something about how it might have affected them. Like, I bet that hurt your feelings. Or if I were you, I would have been annoyed. Or that's not something that people want to hear. Or just some sort of acknowledgement of how it might have affected that person. And then the third step is just like, next time I just need to mind my own business. Or next time I just need to, actually, I don't know the solution for the cheater example. I mean, next time they might need to mind their own business, but yeah, actually that might be the answer.
So the 3 steps are?
First step is acknowledging what happened, not so much the opinion, but just the facts, like what someone would observe if they were watching a video of it. Like, I called you a cheater.
Great. The second step?
Second step is how it might have affected them. Like, I bet that hurt your feelings, or I could see you might have been annoyed, or something like that.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Again, we're just systematizing really hard situations for our students with these executive function challenges while these skills build, right?
Right. And it is remarkable. Sometimes when I teach kids what I would call formula or a flow chart of how to act, it feels unnatural to them, but it works. That specific trifecta is very effective.
And eventually they can make it theirs once they understand how to do it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So we get a lot of parents and teachers ask a question like this, where if I work on organizational skills with my student now, or if I work on planning skills, does building executive function skills academically, does that transfer to social interactions?
Yes, it definitely does. So let's think about what you might work on if you are doing executive function coaching. You're looking at like inhibition, right? So instead of just like, I'm going to say everything I think and feel right now, and we'll let the things, unfold as they do. So you might learn to take turns, in a conversation or in a game. You might interrupt less often. Working memories, so staying connected in a conversation, which is hard, but like just really being like, okay, she went to California on spring break, and then what happened? I'm listening. That's something I think you teach when you're looking at remembering how to do, write down your homework assignment right after the teacher says what it is. Being more flexible. Like your friend wants to play a certain game or go on a certain road trip, when in older young adults or high school students, and you really want to do a certain thing, you might learn from some executive function work that it's like, okay, it's not my first choice, but this is my best friend. It's going to be fun. Just a little bit of flexibility.
Well, and then there's another one too that you talked about before, which I want to reiterate because I think it's so important, but the ability to plan. Not only to plan your school day and your homework and use a planner or Google Calendar or whatever, there's a ton of planning in social relationships, right? When you are, where you're going to meet with people, what you're going to do, what you need to bring. I think that's a really underrated side that we just haven't spoken about yet, is there's so much planning to be a good friend.
That's true. And even in our adult lives, you think about, you're going to someone's house for dinner. There's like 30 decisions you need to make, right?
So, I know now that after a tact in a family, like whenever I want to get together with my friends, it feels like planning a space launch. It's so hard to get on people's schedules. Like there's such an aspect of planning to friendships, and I don't think we've spoken about that yet.
That's true. So planning, if we let's think about something that an older like teenager might do, like, 16 to 19-year-old. Let's say you're planning a camping trip for the weekend, and this is like your first time you get to go do maybe like one overnight in a safe camping place, but it's just you and your friends. Or maybe like the parents have a spot, a little bit of ways, but you're inviting your friends to go camping. There's all sorts of assumptions. Like all of the kids might assume that the parents are bringing everything. And they literally show up with their backpack and some clothes. And it's like, where's your tent? I mean, I've really heard the story where kids end up meeting at like the sand dunes or, at a national park somewhere. And everyone's like, who brought the grill?
I'm laughing because this has happened so many times in my life, right? And so it's such a great understanding to have that. When you're helping kids plan their week in school, that's eventually going to help them in their social relationships. I don't think a lot of us think of it like that. I know I haven't.
Right. And once they learn to plan, like, I've heard kids in some schools, they have a checklist of what the kids need to have out on their desk, which I hadn't heard until recently. I love that. Like you need your one pen, one highlighter, your notebook, your device, and your charger. Like that's just a great idea, right? So maybe when your friend, your child goes over to their friend's house, they have a bag and they have their water bottle, their chapstick, whatever the things are that they need, and that they get into the habit of it. Or maybe in a planning situation for someone older, it's like, who's driving? Do we need to bring anything? Like those two questions can actually save all sorts of, either misunderstandings or chaos.
Yeah, that's great. The question I wanted to close on here is lying. I hear this all the time. Like my son with ADHD is lying nonstop. Is there a component of misunderstanding sometimes?
I think there can be a component of misunderstanding. And I also think that sometimes there's this impulsive, unplanned thing that someone says, and it's a lie.
Yeah.
And what happens, I think, is that I don't know very many people that I've ever worked with from, between the ages of 17 and 27 who get up in the morning and think, today I'm going to lie about what my parents do for a living. Yeah. Or today I'm going to lie about how I spent my summer. Like, it's just not intentional at all. It's not malicious. Sometimes when someone's just trying to be cool or fun or show up in a conversation, or maybe they have a slight insecurity about something and they're impulsive and they haven't learned inhibition, like they haven't learned to think about like, should I really say that my dad is running Comcast or whatever the story is, it just happens. And so sometimes I think it's helpful to teach kids what to do when that happens and to create some grace for when it does, for themselves and for other people. Like sometimes we just want to be cool and say the thing. And then you're like, this is so wrong. And it's like a thought bubble. The thought bubble is hanging between the two people, right? So the person who said the thing that isn't true, like I spent my summer in Europe and really you were like working at a sandwich shop. That's a major issue when you're a high school student. That's a huge lie. And it's socially undesirable behavior, right? So you say, I spent my summer in Europe, and the thought bubble is hanging there. And then the friend's about to respond, or the classmate. So what I like to sort of teach or help people understand is that you can handle it in the moment. It is awkward, but it's not as awkward as maintaining a lie. So here's a couple of ideas. One is to say, actually, I wish I spent my summer in Europe. Now, maybe the person knows it was an impulsive lie, but it's a pretty solid recovery. Yeah. Right? Well, it's pretty solid.
And it's authentic.
It's genuine.
Like again, someone who's impulsive, I'm impulsive myself. It's often it just comes out and you want to pull it back as fast as you can.
And you can't sometimes.
And it's a little scary, right? And you're just like, well, I better keep this one going.
And that's what I hear from parents. I'll get calls from parents saying, I heard that my child said this at school and it's like completely false, whatever that thing is. And oftentimes it's things that will improve a child's social capital or their perception of their social power or their popularity or sort of what people might think of them. So I like to teach them, you have this thought bubble or this lie bubble, and you can very quickly just say, actually, I wish I spent my summer in Europe. And then it can be funny, like the kids might laugh at that, or it might be relatable. Another thing is especially in a home or school environment, you can say, what I meant to say was that I'm hoping to plan, spend my summer traveling next year. Or let's say you asked your child, like, did you finish your homework? And the kid's like, yup. And then you're looking and because they didn't. They might say something like, actually, what I meant to say is I didn't finish it and I'm planning on doing it right now. It's like a total reverse. It's a total reverse, and it's not easy. It's not graceful. But again, once a lie is hanging in the air, really a person has two choices. They defend the lie. And at that point, especially for kids, they're so used to being in hot water for all of the other behaviors. Like they're behind, they're too much, they're whatever. It's like, what's one more thing I have to, protect or defend or take care of? I would rather them just get out from under it as quickly as possible by telling the truth.
And I think that's good for hearing parents as well, because I can think of myself if I'm like, did you finish your homework? My daughter says, yep. Actually, no, I didn't. I can see myself as a parent jumping all over that yep.
Right.
Like, don't you lie to me.
Right.
Versus being like, oh my gosh, like, I can tell that was impulsive. Thank you for making it right away.
Yes. Sometimes when I work with someone who lies a lot, I tell the parents in advance, hey, I'm going to help them. Ideally, we don't want to lie like that in a social setting or even about like schoolwork or work or something else. The first step, I think, is to undo the damage if you can, right? So, if you lie under oath, you're in a different situation. Another thing to explore, maybe in therapy or even in just conversations, is like, what is the source of the lying? Sometimes they feel insecure in that friendship, or they don't feel cool enough, or their summer wasn't cool enough because they worked at a sandwich shop, which,
Or they're impulsive, right? And I think it's good to have that understanding as a parent as well, that sometimes it's not a core character issue. Sometimes it's just something they have to work through the impulsivity.
Absolutely. And I think it's almost never a core character issue. I guess I lean on the side of thinking that because I hear so many people, especially like teenagers and young adults, saying like, oh, I can't believe I did that. What am I going to do?
Yeah, you see the confidence of the other side of it.
The other side. Right? And they're like, I cannot believe that. Like, we broke up and then she talked to me in the hallway and then I told her I had a new girlfriend. And it's like, oh man. I'm like, okay, what are your options, right? Yeah. You can continue lying and that will for sure not work out. Or what? Maybe you just drop it. Maybe you drop it. Maybe you don't do anything with that type of situation. But I like the idea that we can teach, someone between the ages of 7 and 27 who's learning executive function or learning to improve it. We can teach them like there's a middle ground between stopping a behavior you don't like and doing it all the time. Like the middle ground can be this figuring it out, kind of trying to reduce the impact of it if possible.
I love that. Lana, thank you so much. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
Well, you can look on my website, which is lanagollyhorn.com. And that's it.
Thank you so much for everything.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you for joining us on the Executive Function for All podcast. If today's episode brought you any value, please rate us 5 stars and share it with someone who may benefit. And remember, every small step you take builds towards your success. For resources and guidance, visit untappedlearning.com. Keep growing, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.